The Enduring Echoes, The Story of Small Town America. Part 1. The Quiet Heartbeat. Introduction. We hold on to a certain image of America. The high-octane spectacle of New York, the sprawling, sun-drenched chaos of Los Angeles, the relentless hum of innovation from Silicon Valley. But these glittering monuments only tell half the story. The true, complex soul of the nation is not found in the cities that rush toward tomorrow, but in the quiet places where time seems to slow down. This is the enduring landscape of small-town America. It is a place often dismissed, occasionally romanticized, but rarely understood. These towns, scattered across prairies or clinging to the vestiges of old railroad lines, are more than just dots on a map. They are the petri dishes where American identity was cultivated, where community was first defined, and where the fundamental struggles of prosperity and decline have played out for over 2 centuries. In the next 15 minutes, we embark on a deep dive. We will explore the forgotten blueprints that created these towns, celebrate the vibrant golden age of Main Street, and finally confront the technological and economic forces that ushered in a profound decline. The story of small-town America is not just a history lesson. It is an echo chamber of the national past, asking us what we have gained and what we have irrevocably lost in the relentless march of progress. Part 2. The Genesis of the Grid, the Creation. The founding of a small town was rarely a romantic gesture. It was a calculated, almost industrial act of necessity. As the American frontier expanded westward, settlers and speculators had to solve a fundamental problem: how to efficiently organize civilization in the vast, untamed landscape. The answer lay in the rigid, practical grid system, a design often mandated by land ordinances. This blueprint defined the core of the small town. Lots were standardized, streets ran parallel, and everything revolved around a central hub. But what determined the location of that hub? Initially, it was geography and resource. A town might appear simply because a river crossing required a ferryman, or because a deep vein of coal needed mining, or because a stretch of prairie was ideally fertile for wheat. These were single industry towns, their very existence tied to a singular, non-renewable promise. If the mine closed or the oil dry rye, the town faced an existential threat. But the true architect of the American small town was the railroad. In the 19th century, railroads weren't just transportation, they were economic deities. The decision of where the rail company laid its track was a literal matter of life and death for a fledgling community. A town that secured a rail stop became a boom town. It attracted the grain elevator, the lumber yard, and the distribution center. Its future was assured, at least for a time. The town square would quickly be dominated by the depot, with the essential Main Street branching out perpendicular to the tracks. This layout solidified the town's social hierarchy: commerce first, then community, then homes. The early small towns became perfect ecosystems of localized capitalism. The farmer brought his goods to the rail depot, then spent his earnings at the local bank, the local general store, and the local blacksmith. Money flowed constantly, but it stayed local. There was little need or ability to travel further afield. This isolation, this forced self-reliance, cemented a powerful, almost tribal identity. Everyone knew the general store owner, the school teacher, and the town sheriff. This inherent familiarity meant that reputation was currency, and community trust was the primary form of social collateral. These towns weren't merely functional. They were the first true examples of interconnected, self-regulating American society. Part 3. The Golden Age of Main Street, the Peak. The decades following World War II are often remembered as the zenith of small-town prosperity. The American economy was booming, and these localized hubs were enjoying their golden age. Main Street was the undisputed queen of this era. It was more than a commercial strip, it was the town's living room, its pulse point, and its cultural nexus. On a Saturday morning, Main Street was a kaleidoscope of activity. The local druggist wasn't just selling aspirin, he was serving milkshakes at the soda fountain and acting as an informal town councilor. The hardware store, usually run by a generational family, held everything from nuts and bolts to Christmas decorations. You wouldn't browse through aisles. You'd ask Mr. Johnson for a widget for the Model T, and he'd know exactly what you meant.
Social life was meticulously organized around local institutions. The high school football team was the unifying force on Friday nights, forging rivalries and pride that transcended social class. The local church wasn't just a place of worship, it was the backbone of charitable work and community festivals. Even the town's one movie theater, usually called the Bijou or Rialto, became a shared cultural experience. This era was defined by deep, almost suffocating levels of trust and accountability. If you needed a loan, the local bank manager knew your parents, your business, and your character. It was an unofficial social contract enforced by constant visibility. This was the strength, and sometimes the weakness, of small-town life. The post-war era brought stability. Small factories, often supplying components for the booming defense or automobile industries, provided reliable, middle-class wages. These were jobs that required a high school diploma, but could support a family, a house with a yard, and a safe, stable life. The local school system, often consolidated into a single building, was the town's proudest possession. It educated the children, hosted the community events, and preserved the local memory. When a community rally needed to be held, the gymnasium was the venue. When the town needed volunteers, the PTA led the charge. This golden age created the idyllic cultural image of the small town, a place of simple virtues, unwavering patriotism, and shared collective purpose. It was the quintessential expression of the American dream, scaled down and accessible. But this stability was underpinned by a fragile isolation. Small towns thrived because the outside world was inconvenient to access. As technology began to dismantle that inconvenience, the golden age would rapidly fade. This isolation meant they were structurally slow to adapt to national market shifts. The very economic engine of America was about to shift gears, and the small towns were not in a position to adjust.
Part 4. The Great Retreat and Decline. The 1950s and 60s brought an insidious new wave of modernization that would fundamentally fracture the small-town model. The two largest culprits were the automobile and the Interstate Highway System. The interstate was a marvel of civil engineering, designed for speed and efficiency, but its very design was detrimental to the small town. By routing traffic around population centers, it effectively severed Main Street's vital artery of passing commerce. The traveler no longer stopped for gas or a sandwich. They zipped past, often miles away. The local diner starved for business. The second blow was the rise of the big box retailer. The suburban mall and later the massive Walmart or Kmart stores were built along the new highways. These retailers leveraged economies of scale that no local hardware or grocery store could match. They offered a dizzying array of goods at prices Main Street could never touch. The result was devastating. Main Street began to die. It wasn't a sudden death, but a slow strangulation. One by one, the family businesses closed their doors. The drugstore, the bakery, the local movie theater, all succumbed to the new gravity of the nearest big city or the highway hub. The closure of the local Bijou wasn't just the end of a business, it was the loss of a shared communal experience. This economic collapse triggered the infamous brain drain. As the local businesses disappeared, so did the job opportunities for young people. College graduates and even high school graduates had to leave their hometowns to find meaningful work.
This exodus created a demographic disaster. The population aged rapidly, the tax base shrank, and the energy of youth vanished. The decline was not merely economic, it was a profound social erosion. With fewer people, the shared community institutions became difficult to maintain. School consolidation became necessary, often meaning children had to commute to neighboring towns. The local football team, once the pride of the town, merged with rivals. The old social cohesion, once maintained by constant visibility, began to fray. In the 1980s and 90s, the decline accelerated with the final wave of manufacturing job losses. As global supply chains took hold, the small factories that had once provided stable wages moved overseas, leaving behind rusted-out shells of buildings and hundreds of unemployed workers. These communities were left with a deeply painful legacy, a profound sense of abandonment by the very national system they had helped build. This is the source of much of the quiet disillusionment and the growing cultural divide that defines modern rural and urban America. Part 5. The Enduring Spirit. Conclusion. The story of small-town America is not yet over. After decades of struggle, a slow but significant shift is occurring. The qualities that once limited these towns are now becoming assets. In an age of digital burnout and high urban costs, the low cost of living, the sense of safety, and the strong remnants of community are attracting a new wave of settlers. The rise of remote work has unchained white-collar professionals from the cities, allowing them to seek a quieter, more intentional life. Today's revival is not about bringing back the old mill or the original five-and-dime store. It is about adaptation. Towns are leveraging their architectural history for tourism, turning abandoned spaces into art galleries or microbreweries. They are focused on becoming places again, not just economic hubs. It is an acknowledgement that their history and unique aesthetic are now their most valuable assets. The small town remains the purest expression of the American struggle, the fight between independence and interdependence, between tradition and the relentless current of change. As we move forward, the survival of these towns reminds us that true progress isn't just about building bigger and faster, it's about honoring the past and preserving the quiet, essential heartbeat of community that began on a humble main street long ago. If you found value in this deep dive into American history, please like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments what small town story should we tell next.